When you realize you're in a setback, you don't have to blow up your whole life. These experiences are inevitable. What small building blocks can you put in place when you start to see certain warning signs? I was not surprised when I got laid off.
Author and journalist Amy Shoenthal. Amy Shoenthal is the author of the Setback Cycle.
An author and activist, Amy Shoenthal.
You don't fully understand something until it happens to you. When the walls crash down, all of a sudden, the whole room opens up. Setbacks can really be the catalyst for reinvention. I don't want you to go through a setback, but when stuff happens, here's something that can help you through it. One of the things people are so afraid to do is to...
Amy Shoenthal, welcome to the Ginni Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am equally as excited to have you, Amy, because I love books that talk about some issue or an obstacle that happens and gives you tangible stories and tools to overcome it. And your book, The Setback Cycle, it's a deeply reflective book. Did you notice a common thread in the people that you were speaking to?
It was interesting because everyone seemed to go through this very uniform formula where they would talk about their journey, talk about some path that they were on, and then something happens, whether it's a big dramatic thing or a series of small things that gives them some sort of realization. And that seemed to be the moment that they really lit up when they were talking about that part of the journey, the part that sent them off course, but redirected them in some way that sent them to the thing, the venture, the business that they created that I was interviewing them about. And that's the part that they got most excited about. And for every telling, it was when they climbed out of a setback. And so I started to wonder, like, why was this happening? Because it went beyond just the standard advice of you can learn from your mistakes, or there's a concept called post-traumatic growth that says, you know, innovation comes after trauma, but not every setback is a trauma and not every setback is a mistake. So at either end of the spectrum, like, these existing definitions weren't really in capturing everything I was hearing. And I couldn't figure out something that really defined this uniform experience. And so I came up with it. It is the Setback Cycle, and it is science-based. I talked to some very, very intelligent academics and psychologists and researchers and executive coaches to come up with this cycle. And yeah, it just talks about how to climb through a setback, whether the small everyday ones or the big life-changing ones.
Did you notice that when a certain person was going through a setback, did a support system play a part in the recovery? Or was that a key factor in the bouncing back from a setback?
Huge. One chapter is dedicated entirely to cultivating your community, because everyone has a support system, even if they don't realize it. And I have some examples of how people relied on their community to get through setbacks, and then some ways that people can start to understand how broad their community actually is and draw those connections, make new ones, and even reconnect with old ones. Because one of the things people are so afraid to do is to reconnect after they've lost touch with someone. And then they might be in a phase of their life where they're like, wow, I really kind of wish I could talk to this person about it, but it's been 10 years, it's too awkward. It's never as awkward as you think it's going to be. So one of the biggest ways to climb out of the setback cycle is through fostering community. And that is, you know, it involves reconnecting, making new connections, and deepening connections that you already have.
Did parenting and upbringing play a part in how resilient people are to overcome a setback cycle?
Oh, of course. I mean, your childhood is incredibly formative. And there's a couple places where I touch on that within the book, not necessarily parenting, but just like formative experiences that happen that impact how you deal with situations that come up. And one of those, an example of that is how you manage expectations or how you set expectations for yourself. So one of the things that people don't always realize is that the root of our expectations may not come from us. They may have been imposed by someone else. And that could be a parent, it could be a relative, it could be some bigger cultural or societal factor. And those expectations that whether you're like a perfectionist or you're setting your sights like too low, that comes from somewhere. And so I interviewed this incredible expert. Her name is Maura Aarons-Mealy. She's the author of The Anxious Achiever. And she talks about her own expectations and how they're rooted in her overcoming her anxiety. And that sometimes when people are trying to work through anxiety, that manifests as overachieving and perfectionism and just trying to strive so high that it can be incredibly unrealistic. And so when she sees herself striving for some sort of crazy expectation, she pauses and says, "Hi, Mom." To sort of remind her that these expectations are not her own. It comes from her upbringing. It comes from her parents. So, and I have a whole exercise that she actually crafted with me, and it talks about managing your expectations and kind of closing the great expectations gap.
What is the correlation between a well-rested person and how they overcome a setback cycle? Is it clearer for them to move forward if they're more rested?
Yes, rest helps people think clearly and make sound decisions, thinking about what you're good at, where you're going to go next. That all requires a clear mind. And your mind is not clear when you're going through a setback. But you're also probably not sleeping very well when you're going through a setback. Someone once said, like, the night before they give a big presentation or a big talk, they are not going to sleep. They don't sleep well because they're excited about it and they're nervous about it. And so they just have sort of understood that the night before a big presentation, they don't sleep. I know I am not going to sleep the night before publication day. And that's how it is, you know? We all know that prioritizing rest is important and avoiding burnout is important. And it's not always realistic, because if you're someone who wants a full and exciting life, that expansion causes stress, even if that stress is positive. And it unfortunately does not always correlate with rest. So you kind of have to figure out your own patterns, your own systems to overcome when you are not getting rest so that you can make up for it.
There's a lot of introspection that seems to happen, or a point of reflection. I always feel that reflection is one of those things that people typically are conditioned to do at the end of the year, because they're like, oh, let's just make out New Year's resolutions for the year at goals. And that's the first and only time they do it. It seems like, from what you're saying too, reflection is so important to do frequently. And this is kind of a tool for any kind of one self-awareness, but also for a setback cycle too.
Absolutely. One of the activities I have at the very beginning of the book, in the establish phase, because sometimes we don't even realize if we're sleepwalking through a setback. It happens to many people. It happened to me. What I like to do is show people how to wake themselves up to signal whether or not they are in a setback or not, because it's not always as intuitive as you may think. And so this is called the alarm clock checklist. And two of the questions I have, which you can use at any point in your life. It doesn't have to be when you're going through a setback. It doesn't have to be in January when you're doing New Year's resolution. Just ask yourself two questions. What are you most energized by? And what are you disengaged with?
It's also a doable exercise, right? It's not this long to-do list of like, oh gosh, I've got to sit here and go to therapy with myself. It's just two simple questions.
You can have a whole big journaling practice, and that's fine. I have a very small journaling practice because it's easy for me. And I just, every day I sit down and I say, okay, what do I want to accomplish today? And I don't list more than 3 things. And then I say, how am I feeling? What am I excited about? What am I grateful for? That's it. It's less than a page. It's 2 minutes. It helps ground me for the day, but it's not like I'm not like doing the artist's way with my morning pages and sitting, not like and I'm a writer, right? You would think I would be doing this, but it's just like, you've just set goals that are realistic for you to maintain so that they become habits.
When I started my quote unquote entrepreneurial journey, morning pages was one thing that I read in Julia Cameron's Artist's Way. And this was obviously pre-2020. So I had 3-hour blocks to do my 3 pages, and then your gratitude journal, and then your meditation. So I thought morning routines had to be long and elaborate because that was the only resource that that's the only way it was being taught to me. But you mentioned something here about your kind of practice, how it grounds you. It sounds very doable. It sounds like you get it accomplished in 2 minutes, but it just sets the tone for your day. Did you find this habit in the people that you spoke to as well? Do they have some form of a grounding practice?
There was one woman I interviewed who went through her setback, and when her life sort of fell apart, she was working towards opening her own restaurant, She spent years of her life working towards this opening. It all fell apart. Her investors pulled out and she had to change cities and like move back in with her parents. Like it was this life-shattering setback. And so she's someone who kind of went on that spiritual journey. She went on a, retreat in Mexico. She did ayahuasca. Like she did all these like really intense, introspective things. Not everyone I interviewed did that, Some people were just trying to balance building a business with parenting, with the small micro setbacks that they encountered every day. And I think it just depends on the person. And when you look at someone else's journey or when you look at someone else's habits, like that morning routine I just described, that's what works for me. That might not be what works for you. I kind of took inspiration from other folks I knew who were doing similar things and I created my own. So there's really no, I think, one formula for how people start their day or ground themselves in some sort of mindful practice. Like I can't meditate. A lot of people cite meditation as like this transformative thing. I know it's important. I get that. I understand it. I believe it. Like there is science to prove that meditation helps people and I can't do it. Yeah. I can't sit for 10 minutes listening to a meditation. I hate it. And so, to me, writing is meditative, exercising is meditative. Like those are the things that sharpen my focus. And I'm still going to try to meditate whenever I feel motivated to do so. But that's a really hard one for me. And so I don't push myself to do something, even though it works so well for others. I don't push myself to do this thing because that's just not what works for me.
What was it drew you to this particular subject matter?
It was just such a universal experience. And I'm interviewing these high-profile people, Stacey London, Norma Kamali, Robin Arzón. And these are, really well-known people who are having these experiences and talking about them publicly. But you and I are having the same experiences, maybe on a smaller scale, maybe in a less public forum. And I think that we all have such admiration for these people who are on these big stages and have these big platforms who have gone through some stuff and overcome it. But everyday people have done that too. And I think what I do in my column for Forbes is I try to find the stories of people who have historically been underestimated and overlooked. And yet they're doing the work to solve society's biggest problems. And they just deserve more attention and celebration than we've given them. And I kind of want people to read the Setback Cycle and come for the stories of the people you've heard of. But there's a lot of stories in here of people you've never heard of, but you're going to be so inspired by. And you're going to see some of yourself on these pages. I wrote this book because I wanted people to see what I was seeing and learn from it and be able to grow from it. And just like have this framework and this new perspective on certain experiences that you may have had that maybe you didn't realize were a setback, right? I interviewed someone who told me, 40 years later, she realized that the thing that got her to her career was a setback. And you don't always realize it when you're in it. But once you start making those connections, it can really, really give you a new lens on life and make it transformative.
I'm curious, Amy, what is the most recent impactful setback that you've experienced?
Well, I was laid off from my job a few months ago, and that's one of the most common career setbacks people can experience. But for me, it wasn't really a setback. It was kind of a green light. Someone reminded me, well, you've always wanted to start your own business, and you said you wanted to start your own business when your daughter entered kindergarten. Well, I was laid off in June and my daughter entered kindergarten the following September. So, I probably would not have left on my own. I had a really nice, comfortable job that I was doing good work in. But when you're sort of propelled into a new future, all of a sudden you find yourself putting more effort into things and doing work that's even more innovative and more creative because you can't do things the way they've always been done. You have to, draw on that part of your brain that is pushing you to try something new. This sounds ridiculous to say, but being laid off was one of the greatest gifts that I've ever been given. And I am not the only founder to say that.
I mean, if we were to put this in a woo-woo kind of context, sometimes the universe or a situation delivers a circumstance for you to kind of propel you to what you've always wanted or felt called to do.
Totally.
And this is a perfect example of that. This is what you wanted to do. And you wouldn't have thought of it. It just happened, and it just was like, okay, this is what I got to do now.
Exactly. And what I didn't realize, or I realized it without being fully conscious of it, is I had been building the foundation for my own business for years, because it was what I wanted to do. And I knew what happened to women in marketing over 40. And I saw what happened when I came back from maternity leave and my role was sort of diminished and made smaller and smaller. And I didn't ignore the warning signs. When you realize you're in a setback, you don't have to blow up your whole life. You don't have to totally just abandon everything because you realize you're in a setback. But what small building blocks can you put in place when you start to see certain warning signs? I was not surprised when I got laid off. I sort of expected it to happen at some point. Or maybe I thought I would leave, or maybe I thought it would be under different circumstances, but I wasn't shocked. And I had built enough in advance so that 3 months later, I had a pretty big book of business. It wasn't as much of a shock or as much of a setback as I thought it would be. It was, it hurt. It was painful. It wasn't like exciting. It wasn't great, but it wasn't as...
You were skipping out.
Exactly. It wasn't as much of a shock as I think other people may have perceived it to be. And so that was great. Yeah. And the really ironic thing was I had submitted my final manuscript, 48 hours before I was laid off. And all of a sudden, I had spent 3 years researching setbacks, writing people's stories about them. And all of a sudden, I'm in one of the most common career setbacks someone can experience. Yeah. But you don't fully understand something until it happens to you. You can be the expert on setbacks, truly. And then it happens, like the big one, of course we all experience micro setbacks every day, but this big one happened and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. But it was a green light. That setback was a green light.
In someone's personal life, I imagine heartbreak, death, something, they're having to move for a particular reason. Those three would be common setbacks. What have you found to be some common themes of how people, one, reflect on that setback and how they move? Because heartbreak is one of those things, it can get quite tricky, can't it?
And I think that the way I just described sort of like floating along in a job and not leaving because you convince yourself everything is fine, other people have it worse, that's also how people experience something like divorce. People don't want to leave because it seems too energy intensive to leave and it seems easier to just stay. And yet so many people that I've interviewed cite that moment where they finally decide to get the divorce as the catalyst for incredible personal growth. Not saying it's easy. It's still painful. It's still heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But as Amanda Gotts, she is a founder who I interviewed for the book, whose divorce sparked her, sort of creative rebirth. And she said to me, when the walls crash down, all of a sudden, the whole room opens up. And I thought that was one of the best analogies ever. And that's how she described her divorce and her catalyst for building her new life kind of on her own terms, not based on what she thought she should be doing. Setbacks can really be the catalyst for reinvention. And that does not necessarily have to be super dramatic. It can be small. You do not have to blow up your whole life if you realize that you've been sleepwalking through a setback. You can start small, you can start to build new habits, and you can slowly climb your way out.
I actually found out about you through this book I bought at Bliss in Sunnyside, A Magical Day in Sunnyside. And why I particularly like this book, as someone who's not from New York, I'm from Australia. When I used to visit New York, Manhattan was what everybody talked about until one day I found this cute little Airbnb in Sunnyside. And I'm like, this neighborhood, like aubergine, like the coffee shops, the pubs, like you've got 19 different cultures living in the one block. It is amazing. So I'm curious to know what inspired you to write about this neighborhood, because clearly there is a very deep love for it as well.
I mean, same as you. I moved here because this is where my husband grew up, and I had never heard of Sunnyside. I grew up on Long Island and moved to Manhattan as soon as I could because the city was so exciting to me. When I met my husband, he told me he had grown up here and Sunnyside just felt like somewhere like very far away, like deep into Queens. And then he took me here. And I was like, what is this place? And it has houses and trees and greenery, but it's also 15 minutes from Midtown. I was like, why is this so amazing? And also, why don't more people know about this place? And then when we moved here to raise my daughter, we moved here and I would just be reading my daughter little storybooks about little characters who were going along through their little town. It was the Angelina Ballerina series. And she lives in the charming town of Chipping Cheddar. And they go to like the bakery and the doctor and like they have a little town fair. And it's just like very cute. And I think something sparked in my brain one day when we were walking around Sunnyside and we were going to Aubergine, which is the coffee shop. And, you know, you walk into Aubergine, and when my daughter was 18 months old, like the baristas used to come around the counter, pick her up and dance around with her. And it was so cute. And then we would go to Bliss Vintage and buy cute little, you know, treasures that she would pick out because it's this adorable little shop. And Violet, who's the store owner, gives out fairy wands and says, everybody could use a little magic. I mean, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. And then,
no, you can't.
Yeah. And then you go to dinner at the Alcove or Bello, where the owner, again, like they're picking my kid up and dancing around with her. They know everyone in the neighborhood by first name. And it's just like, it's this very small town in the middle of New York City that's right next to Midtown. It's like, so it's just such a special place. And so when I was reading these little books to her, I was like, why did no one ever write a children's book about Sunnyside? And then I was just like playing around and playing with some rhymes. And then I talked to my neighbor down the street, Kate Durkin, who's an incredible illustrator. She agreed to do this crazy project with me, and we published a children's book about Sunnyside. And the best day we ever had was going around to all the store owners, because it's also a celebration of the small businesses in Sunnyside. So going around to the store owners and giving them the book and surprising them was like the best day I can remember.
Now, before I let you go, I'd love to hear your hot neighborhood tips on Sunnyside eateries, if possible. So, Amy, best bakery in Sunnyside.
Best bakery? Oh my God, my friend's going to kill me for saying this, but Allison Logie's the best baker in Sunnyside. She does not have a bakery, but we have all been trying to convince her to start a business and sell her baked goods at Cool Beans, which is a coffee shop on 39th Avenue. Yeah. So everybody tell her to start that business and sell her baked goods.
And we'll have to hit up Penny at Cool Beans to get that going. All right, cool. Best coffee in Sunnyside.
Aubergine.
I think I know the answer to this one.
Come on.
Best Irish pub in Sunnyside.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that one. I feel like there's people much more qualified to answer, but I'm going to go PJ Horgan's.
Best Mexican food.
Semitas El Tigre. So good.
Okay.
So good.
Amazing. Best pizza.
Ooh, Philomena.
Where is Philomena? I haven't tried that one.
Oh my God, it's on Queens Boulevard and I think 43rd or 42nd. It is so good. The owner, David and June, I don't know what they do. They put magic in that pizza, and I am not saying that as a joke. It is so good.
What's the most magical place in Sunnyside?
Bliss Vintage.
I thought you'd say that.
You kind of queued me up for that.
Thank you for it. Yeah, I did. Thank you so much, Amy. You definitely expanded my culinary expectations of the neighborhood. I'm going to check out Philomena. But also, thank you for your time on the Ginni Show. I really look forward to the Setback Cycle when it comes out. So you can pre-order Amy's book, The Setback Cycle. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The links will be in the show notes. So Amy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.